Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Knights of the Pageless Library. I am Ryan Knight, and I have a very special guest with me today, Nathaniel Beardsley. How you doing today, Nathaniel?
I'm doing great. Thanks for saying. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man, no problem. So I found you. You run the Generic Entertainment YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, I've been running that channel for. Well, I started the channel uh, quite a few years ago, something like 6 years ago. But it's only in the last 8 months that I've been doing it regularly, and it's kind of taken off in that time. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed you have some videos on there from a long time. I think some of yours are like 8 years ago.
Yeah, the channel was originally just something I was doing with my friends to just make, home movies like short films and things like that. And it was not really optimized for YouTube at all. And I never expected it to become anything more than just a casual hobby I did with my friends. But about 8 months ago, I uploaded a video that had to do with Brandon Sanderson, and that's kind of what caused people to start.
Sure. Yeah, I noticed
The YouTube algorithm really likes Brandon Sanderson. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed you have some of your really popular ones on there are your Brandon Sanderson ones, which is good because I was gonna bring up his books and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So you've kind of transitioned from a little more of the just kind of making home movie stuff with your friends to it looks like now you're kind of, getting yourself almost into like this booktube kind of niche type deal.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of how I think of the channel as being like mainly a booktube channel, even though the sort of things I do are not really typical booktube content in the sense that it's something like 75% comedy sketches and then like 25% actual book reviews.
Right. Sure. No, and
Because
that's perfect.
yeah, I just like to have like a diversity of content and do something a little bit differently than what other people are doing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and I was kind of glad to have you on just to kind of get your insights on how you've kind of transitioned into this. It looks like your channel's been kind of taken off over the last few months even too, because I seen just not that long ago you had your 1,000 subscriber video, and now I noticed, you're at almost 4,000 right now. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, no, it's definitely surprised me. Especially the last couple of months have been really fast growth. The channel has like doubled in size in the past 2 months or so.
Nice.
So I've been really surprised and happy to see that happen. But yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And one of the reasons I actually really wanted to have you on is I watched your video on Three Body, the series, the Chinese adaptation on YouTube, and I watched your kind of 15-minute talk about it, not being for everyone. And I had recently done Three Body on the channel. I reviewed the audiobook for it, and
yeah,
I had heard about the Chinese adaptation on YouTube, and obviously I knew about the Netflix series possibly coming up, but it was actually your video that got me really wanting to watch the show on YouTube. So I'm only 5 episodes into that still, but it was your video that drove me to watch that. So
oh well, awesome. I'm glad you're checking it out, and I hope you enjoy it so far.
Yeah, I definitely am so far. One thing, and I think you kind of talked about this as well, that's much different about it versus like a lot of stuff you'd watch from the States, is that so it's 30 episodes long, which for most people that's crazy, right, for a show. But
yeah,
I kind of am appreciating it so far because having listened to the book, I mean this show is almost word for word the book, which to me is great to see.
Yeah, I was shocked by how closely even just every line of dialogue sticks to the book. And I think I said this in my review, but for those first 3 episodes in particular, I was actually getting a little bit worried because it was sticking so close to the book that there was almost nothing new.
Sure.
And I was hoping that a 30 episode adaptation of a relatively short book would be able to expand on the characters a lot more, because the characters in the book were somewhat one-dimensional. They weren't the most fully fleshed out characters
Right.
in general, but the first 3 episodes or so don't really do that. But going later on, it really does start to it breaks away from the book a little bit more, but in mostly good ways, and it develops the characters a lot more than there was in the book. So I think that's a good thing.
Right. And I've seen that kind of as a, so I kind of went down a bit of a Cixin Liu rabbit hole here lately. I finished the main trilogy. You know, I did Three Body, The Dark Forest, and Death's End. And I'm hoping to do The Dark Forest and Death's End soon on my channel. And so I've been kind of doing all this research about Cixin Liu, and I've heard that's kind of a complaint of people's, is that he doesn't really write characters. I mean, and
No.
once I kind of finished the books, I really was like, you know, they're kind of right. I mean, it's the characters are mostly just there to further the plot that he just wants to give you, and that's really what they're there for.
They kind of he said that the last part of his development process of writing a book is the development of the characters. Like, first he comes up with the main scientific concepts, and then he comes up with a general plot, and then comes up with the characters.
Oh, sure.
So, but the characters, the way I see it is, I think they're each supposed to, like, not all of them, but a lot of them are just kind of meant to represent different ideas and different facets of humanity. Because really, like, the main character in the trilogy, as is the case with a lot of science fiction, is humanity itself rather than just these individual people. So I think what he's trying to do is represent different ways of being human, and even the names of the characters kind of like represent what they're supposed to embody. Like, I don't speak Chinese, so I'm just going off what I've heard. But the main character of the Dark Forest, Luoji, his name means logic in Chinese.
Really?
In Mandarin. Yeah, and Cheng Xin, her in the third book, her surname means heart. So, and like, you can kind of see that dichotomy in the way those two characters, without getting into spoilers, but in the way those two characters interact with each other and their approaches to problem solving. Like, Luoji has this very kind of rigorous analytical approach to his job as a wall facer, whereas Cheng Xin tends to embody like human empathy more. So I think that's sort of Cixin Liu's approach to characters, is that they're meant to like represent things instead of be, you know, fully fleshed out three-dimensional realistic people.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thought, because I was really surprised when I started the second book and I realized that Wang Miao isn't in it at all, you know, the main character of the first book. And that was really when I started kind of taking a step back, and I thought, okay, this is not necessarily about the characters, because if he can just drop his main character so easily and move on to a new character, the book, the concept is obviously much bigger than what a single person is going to get you. So
yeah, and I think that's not too unusual for science fiction in general.
Sure.
Because, well, I'm trying to think of other examples off the top of my head, but if you take something like Arthur C. Clarke's 2001: A Space Odyssey series, for the most part, every one of those books, you know, there's like long time gaps between each book, and each book kind of focuses on a different character. Even though there are like recurring characters across the books, it's a similar sort of thing where you have a different main cast in the different books. Although, of course, I say that I've only read the first 2 books, but from what I understand, that's like the general trend.
Sure.
So yeah, science fiction tending to focus more on like humanity as itself rather than following a core cast seems to be not unique to the 3-body problem, at least. So,
right. Yeah, and I'm sure you're spot on with that. for me, you know, if you're coming from another book, well, we'll take like Brandon Sanderson's book, for example. Yeah, I'm really only into like the, um, oh my gosh, I'm like stumbling across the name, the Stormlight Archive. So I'm only 3 books into the Stormlight Archive. I haven't even finished that series. But like, you know, that's kind of more typical storytelling that I'm used to, is you have this core cast for the most part, you know, and then you slowly are introducing a couple characters here and there as the story builds. Whereas, you know, 3 Body, it's like, here's this one character, he pushes you through the plot of the first book. We move to the second book, he's nowhere in sight. I don't even know if he gets mentioned in the second book.
He does technically get mentioned a couple of times.
Does he really?
But only in like passing references. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We know that he exists, but that's basically it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense for the way that parts of the book happen, you know, again, kind of staying spoiler free, but you know, with the major time jumps and things like that, it does make sense to want to try to, since it's about actual humans, you know, you are going to run into those problems of, hey, it's, you know, it's been 150 years, this guy's probably not going to be here anymore. So
yeah.
So going down this this rabbit hole of Cixin Liu, I stumbled across this video by a guy that goes by the name Science Fiction with Damian Walter. So this video is titled "Why I Am Boycotting the 3 Body Problem," and he made this. I was actually going to do a full kind of response to this because I think
I've seen this video actually.
Okay, that helps a lot. And if you've seen it, that would help out a lot, so I don't have to fully explain it. It's not very long. It's only about 15 minutes, but he is posing the idea that Cixin Liu's work, so the books as well as the Chinese adaptation YouTube show, are all basically just like Chinese propaganda, essentially. And that Cixin Liu, because of an interview he gave with The Guardian, you know, I think it was like in 2020, and he didn't necessarily sidestep the question when he was asked what he thought of what was being done with the Uyghur Muslims in China.
Yeah.
This guy is basically just saying, oh, since he said that he doesn't really care what's happening to them, therefore Cixin Liu supports genocide of these people. And I was just like, my mind was blown. I was like, wait a minute, are you serious? Like that's what you're going to gather from all of that? What's your thought on that?
It seems like a weird approach to criticize the entire series, and I don't really think there's a strong basis for it. I get the impression that Cixin Liu, I'm not sure how else he could have approached that question in a way that wouldn't get him in trouble.
Sure.
And there are definitely themes in the 3 Body Problem about the need for humanity to cooperate, and there are themes in the book that kind of push against individualism and more for collectivism, in the sense that it's sometimes necessary for individuals to hold like large amounts of power in order to keep humanity safe. One of the main examples of this would be in book 3, the Office of the Sword Holder, who, again, without getting into spoilers, but this one individual has to wield an extraordinary amount of power in order to protect the world. And you also have these ideas like in the second book, there's the philosophy of escapism, where I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. So in response to the coming crisis, some people want to make the decision to flee the planet, and kind of unilaterally all nations in the world come together and ban this ideology of escapism and say that the right to protect all of humanity is more important than an individual's right to escape with their own lives. So I mean, you see these kind of themes in the book, and if you really wanted to stretch it, you could say, well, this is like a justification of China's rather more authoritarian government and some of the questionable policies they've been implementing. But really, in the context of the book itself, I don't see that. I think it's more of an exploration of individualism versus collectivism. And you also have instances that seem to imply the opposite of that, where, you know, like at the, well, okay. I was going to say something that was a pretty big spoiler for book 3. I'm trying to think of the best way to have this discussion without spoiling the entire plot of the series.
Yeah,
but anyway, there
hard.
are, yeah, but anyway, suffice it to say, there are like situations where this topic is explored from other angles, and so I really don't think that the purpose of the entire book series is to say that we should just, you know, have like strong autocratic regimes that should not be questioned, and that we should have these you know, institutions that just are not subject to the will of broader people. Yeah, there's really just not a lot there, I think, in terms of justifying boycotting the entire series because of it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, and I just was shocked that this guy, it's basically a, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater type situation too, where this guy is citing one thing that may or may not have been said during an interview that was quoted in an article, and I went through that entire article, and that one little blip is the only thing, and it's basically kind of like you said, he answered the question in the best way possible when you think about, you know, where he comes from, right?
Yeah.
You know, not everybody is as fortunate as us maybe to get to speak their mind on any topic that they want at any time. So he probably did the best he could with what he is given. And later in that article, he kind of says something to that effect, because he basically says that everyone, you know, has different shackles on, and the best thing he can do is dance in his chains. That's literally what he says later in the same article.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, and I do think that, to Damian Walter's point, that there could be something there with, I'm sure, you know, anything that comes out of China probably does go through a, you know, rigorous scrutiny before it's even allowed to leave the country, if that's what somebody wants to do. So
yeah,
yes, there could be something there to say that, you know, who knows, maybe some things were stripped from the book that might have been going against what the Chinese Communist Party believes, but I don't necessarily think you could pin all of that on the author. I mean, it's just wild.
And I think this is kind of a case of separating the author from their work, and me personally not really being bothered if the author believes some things that I disagree with.
Yes.
Obviously, I do not condone China's actions in Xinjiang, or what's happening with the Uyghur population there. And if Shishin Liu like genuinely supports that, then I condemn that. But that doesn't like affect my enjoyment of the books, because I don't feel like it's my personal responsibility to read up on the author's personal views about every topic, and especially to find this like one interview where he said something that is maybe questionable. You know, I don't feel this kind of, I don't feel like that's a useful use of my time, and I don't feel like I have any real moral obligation to do that. I don't feel like I'm harming anyone by just like enjoying a book series.
Sure. No, and yeah. I completely agree with you. And this guy also was saying that the Chinese YouTube series of Three Body is blatantly full of propaganda stuff. And now I'm not very far into it, But if all he's really citing is the fact that, you know, they play, the biggest thing I noticed is there's little, mostly during the flashback scenes, they're playing kind of like communist driven songs, right, that are very kind of all for like the Communist Party. But if that's what he's citing, I think he kind of completely missed the point, because that's the whole point of the flashbacks, is that's the period at which it takes place. Like that's the whole point of the song being played during those scenes. So
well, I do think the show is probably subject to a little bit more censorship than the book was.
absolutely,
And
yes.
there are probably like various reasons for that. One might just be that censorship is worse now. The book was originally published in like 2005. But I think also probably more importantly, the television format is you know, there are certain things that you can show or write about in a book that would be difficult to show in an appropriate manner in a TV show that wouldn't be subject to censorship. And one of the main things is some of the things that Ye Wenjie goes through during her flashback scenes. Especially, there's one episode 11, which is cut down by like 10 minutes. It's like 10 minutes shorter than all the other episodes, and it's very conspicuous. Sure. And the reason for that is because a large section of that episode got cut out because it was depicting kind of the violence of the Cultural Revolution. And there were some other scenes that were cut out as well. Like, this isn't really a spoiler, the scene at the very beginning of the book, if you recall, where Ye Wenjie's father was tortured and killed by the Red Guard.
Sure.
That scene was originally filmed, from what I understand, but it was cut from the show for censorship reasons.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
It does seem to me like there was a little bit more censorship, and that's a bummer, definitely. But it did detract from the show, I think, because some of that context is really important for understanding Ye Wenjie and her motivations.
Right, yeah.
But also, from what I understand, to take the other side, is that it's not really necessary to go into all the details of the violence of the Cultural Revolution in a Chinese television show, because everybody, or the vast majority of people watching the show, are already going to be intimately familiar with that time period. They don't even say Cultural Revolution in the TV show; they just say that time or that time period.
Right.
And because it's not really necessary to explicitly state what you're talking about. In the same way that if in America, a movie about World War II and how people were affected about World War II doesn't really need to depict the Holocaust, because everybody already knows what the Holocaust is and what happens. And if somebody, you know, if you have like a character in a story who is a Holocaust survivor or was in Europe at the time or something like that, you don't really need to depict like every detail of that flashback in order to understand where they're coming from, because it's just like kind of a shared cultural memory that everybody knows. So I think there's also that element to it where you don't need to show everything in a TV show. But still, it does strike me as strange that those scenes were originally filmed and then cut. So yeah, there's both sides to it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point, though, that, I mean, especially when you take a look at where it's coming from, you know, maybe that is a little bit of a sore spot in their past. So, you know, maybe they don't necessarily want to, you know, put that on blast out there. I try to see both sides of it in a way. I mean, like I said, it's a little unfair to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater on the whole subject simply because of, you know, I just kind of look at it as this book comes from a place that I'm very unfamiliar with, but that is also completely different to where I live and where I grew up. So, and it comes from a man who grew up under circumstances I probably couldn't even imagine in my mind. So, I mean, like I said, it's what I found most of a bummer about Damian Walters' video is that he's basically also telling his audience to boycott it. And suppose like his YouTube channel is not huge. He has almost 8,000 subscribers, but I guess he has like one of the more popular book podcasts. You know, he like ranks in the top 10 oftentimes. And
Oh, really?
That's according to his own words.
Okay.
And I wasn't too impressed though, because on his video boycotting the three body problem, everybody who responded sort of with, you know, the mindset that we are responding with, he just blatantly dismisses their arguments and refuses to engage at all. So I'm not gonna get too invested on really anything he has to say. So
Yeah, I mean, I think if he wants to like personally boycott the series, I think that's totally fine, and that's a personal choice. It's just not something that it's not a conclusion I would come to. I don't really think it's justified for me.
Sure.
But yeah.
And I was shocked to see that for the Netflix series, I guess there were something like 5 US senators that were contacting Netflix because of the specific Guardian interview with Six and Liu that has that quote in it. They were basically they were basically trying to tell Netflix that they should reevaluate making the series at all because of potentially, you know, the author's viewpoints on certain things.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely frustrating. I don't even know. Well, that's a different question, but I don't know how excited I am for the Netflix series in general.
Oh, really? Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that, because I did want to know what you were thinking about that.
Well, I'm just a little bit skeptical of it based on the information that we've been given so far. One thing that is interesting is that it seems to be taking a much more international focus than the books, and especially the first book, in that there really aren't many Chinese actors in the show. And
it's probably been very Americanized.
Yeah, at the very least it's been like globalized, and
okay, sure.
There's lots of actors from all over the world, which the latter 2 books in the series definitely do have a pretty international focus, but all of the main characters are still Chinese, and the cultural context of the Cultural Revolution is, I think, really important, especially to the first book. And not having that in there, I don't know if it will be in there, but if it isn't, I think there will definitely be something lost. So yeah,
well,
there's that.
Like you said, that's one of the very few major character building points, because like you said, that's sort of Wenjie's whole driving force into the decision she made that technically spurs the rest of the series on.
Yeah. It's a I mean, I could imagine them doing a good show while cutting that out, but it still seems to me like it won't be the same story.
Sure.
It will just be something totally different, you know, and if they're going to cut that out, then they're probably going to just change the entire plot in some pretty significant ways. So maybe they'll end up making a good show, but I just don't know if it will be like an actual like 3-body adaptation, or if it will just be something completely different.
Right.
I guess we'll see. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it definitely won't be nearly as I highly doubt it'll be some 30 episodes long true adaptation, unlike the Chinese YouTube series is. How do you feel about it being made by the same guys who brought us, Game of Thrones?
Well, I haven't actually watched Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Yeah, but I still have heard a lot of bad things about those last few seasons, and the last one in particular.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like a good sign to me.
The silver lining that I can personally say to that is largely in the beginning of the Game of Thrones show, it stuck very closely to the books. You would often get very one-to-one scenes from the book portrayed on the screen, and they were portrayed very well, actually. They were well written, well directed, well shot. It was once they passed the end of where the books were, and they had no written material to go off of, and they started making up their own stuff, that, in my opinion, the show went just straight downhill because there was a very obvious tonal shift. So for me personally, I'm really hoping that if they have all the source material there, you know, it's cut and dry. These are the books you're following for the show. I'm hoping, since all the source material's there, they hopefully can't screw it up, is what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be good. I don't know. I want to reserve making too many judgments on it preemptively. Sure. But I do think that the Tencent show is good enough that I'll be totally fine if the Netflix show is bad, even though it will be a little bit frustrating because that's probably going to be what most people know of Three Body from.
Sure.
If it becomes popular enough, and then there's even the question of like, will it even get a second season? Because Netflix has a really bad habit of canceling shows after season 1.
Right.
So it has to become like really popular in order to get a second season these days. Which, yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I agree. It's probably a good one to reserve judgment on until it's out. Have you read the prequel and the follow-up to the, I can't think of what so you got Ball Lightning, is that right? Is that the prequel to Three Body?
Yeah, it's from what I understand the prequel, but I haven't read it.
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah, what's interesting is it was actually published in China before the Three Body Problem series, but it didn't get an English translation, I believe, until 2019, which was after the entire Three Body series had been released.
Oh, okay.
So it in China, it wasn't really a prequel. It was just a kind of the original book.
Sure.
I think I might be wrong, but it seems to have been released early on, whereas in the US it actually kind of is a prequel. But what's interesting is they actually had to change some elements of the plot for the English translation of the books in order to not spoil elements of Ball Lightning.
Yeah, and I also, if I remember right too, there's a certain instance in the Dark Forest book that they had to completely change for the English translation because a lot of the things that were going to be used were sources from the Ball Lightning book or something to that effect. So it was completely changed for the English translation.
Yeah, it was Frederick Tyler's Wallfacer plan.
Yes,
was changed. Yeah, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then there's the follow-up to the series, right? I can't even think.
The Redemption of Time.
Redemption of Time. Yes.
Yeah.
And that one is not written by Chisholm Liu. Is that right?
Yes. From what I understand, that was originally a fan fiction book that got published by the same publishers as the Three Body Problem, and it has Chisholm Liu's approval, but it nonetheless remains very controversial among fans, and I have not read it because some people say that it ruins the experience of the original trilogy. Some people say they really enjoy it, but I don't really feel like a need to read it. Maybe someday I will. I'm a little bit nervous about it changing my perception of the events from the books because apparently it retcons quite a few things and introduces some elements that are more on the fantasy end than the science fiction end, from what I understand.
Interesting.
So yeah,
I was just curious about that because I've only listened to the main 3 books as well, and I was curious if I should follow up with those or not, going forward. So
yeah, I mean, that's like a hotly debated subject that I couldn't really weigh on since I haven't read it, but
right.
Yeah,
interesting. Might have to check it out just for that reason that it's hotly, it's a hot topic.
yeah.
So just shifting gears a little bit here, just in our talks we had before we got on here, you kind of had said that you aren't really into audiobooks, which that's kind of our bread and butter over here. That's why my brother and I originally had started this podcast. So as I've said, I listened to all these books. You read them all yourselves. So what what kind of what's the thing that kind of keeps you away from audiobooks for the most part?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. One very minor thing is that I'm just not good with wearing headphones for long periods of time.
Okay.
When I read, I usually like to read in long chunks. And wearing headphones just gets very uncomfortable for me after a few hours, and it makes it hard for me to concentrate. But then, just in general, my brain just always wanders when I'm listening to audiobooks. It's very hard for me to stay focused, and I constantly find myself having to rewind, and I don't know. I like having control over the pacing of my reading.
Okay.
I
Sure.
like being able to just pause anytime I want and look up and think about what I've just read, as opposed to kind of like being at the whim of the narrator, so to speak. Yeah, it's really, honestly though, it's more just convention than anything else, because I haven't listened to too many audiobooks.
Sure.
It's just something I've never really gotten into.
Yeah. No, and
uh,
fair. That's fair enough. Do you like so without getting too much into it, like is your job something that would allow you to listen to them while you do your job, or no, not at all?
no, yeah, I know that that's a reason that a lot of people say they like audiobooks. And
Yeah.
if I had a job where I was like doing long commutes every day, then I probably would listen to audiobooks, or at the very least I would listen to something, you know.
Sure.
Like I don't really do podcasts too much either. No offense.
No, no, none taken.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying that on a podcast. But yeah, I don't really do podcasts or audiobooks, but I can imagine that if I had, you know, a situation like that where I just had nothing to occupy myself with, I would have to make the switch.
Yeah,
And who
I
knows,
just
maybe one day I will.
yeah, I mean, just so for us, when we kind of started this, that was both my brother and I had worked in like agriculture and farming. And
Oh, okay.
so when you're driving a tractor or combine for 8 hours a day, and I hate listening to conventional radio. So it was,
Yeah.
that was a good way for me to still get, stories and things like that versus just listening to the same songs over and over again every hour on the radio,
Yeah.
was really kind of the tipping point for me. And then even in my job now, I commute often a long time, and then I also am able to throw my headphones on throughout the day just regularly and listen, so that it's much easier for me, especially since I'm a very slow reader and I suffer from kind of the same things that you're saying with audiobooks, where you find yourself going back and re-listening. I find myself going back and rereading pages because my eyes scan the whole page, and then I realize by the end I'm like, I have no idea what I just read, so I got to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally fair. And I get that with physical books too. I feel like my attention span has become worse recently with just any media, probably because of the effects of the internet and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult. We're probably maybe around the similar age, so I'm 34, and I've kind of grown up with the internet, right? Like kind of was around when it really first started getting kicking into high gear, and then obviously to where we are today, where it's pretty much all you see all day every day. And
Yeah.
I really do, I find myself struggling a lot with that, because I've probably sat and scrolled through Netflix shows more often than I've actually watched Netflix shows, because
Yeah.
for some
I can
reason
relate.
the idea of having so many things available is almost more daunting to me than just if I had, hey, here's 10 things you can watch for the week, that's all you get. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, no, definitely. I relate to that a lot. And I fear that that situation is only going to become worse as it. I mean, on the one hand, like it's a blessing that content creation is so easy now. Like
Yes.
anyone can go and self-publish a book or even an audiobook.
Sure.
And with YouTube, anyone is able to kind of create films and find an audience for them. It takes maybe it'll take some time, but you can do it. And so it's easier than ever now to just get content out there. And so there's like so much of it that you just it becomes impossible to see it all. And now with
Right.
AI, it's going to become even easier to just produce mass amounts of content. Within like 5 or 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we have like you know, maybe not full Netflix shows produced by AIs, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have more and more AI produced content that is like genuinely consumable, you know, and
Yeah.
that's going to make it even worse. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to me, it's a little bit of a scary prospect. One of the guests we actually had on a little while ago, he's big into kind of the audiobook and voice acting industry. And he, this topic came up about AI generated voice actors, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much already here. You know, you can feed just a few seconds of your voice into some of these generators, and then you feed the book into it, and this generator can read the entire thing in your voice for you, basically. And
Yeah.
so you pretty much already have technically, you know, fully produced audio, you know, AI audiobooks, which is terrifying.
Yeah, no, it's there's I believe one of those websites is called 11 Labs that just came out pretty recently, and the results are very impressive at
Sure.
mimicking like celebrity voices and things. And it's hard to imagine that in the future, and probably pretty soon, we'll be able to just have entire audiobooks narrated by literally anyone we want.
Right.
We can have like an audiobook narrated by Elvis Presley if we wanted to. We can just, yeah, it's hard to believe, but
It's a little scary, especially
yeah,
it's all at this same time, you know, where I am coming off the 3-body problem, which already kind of had my mind blown with with the technology it gets into, and I don't know, I'm hopeful, but I'm also kind of skeptical on necessarily how good of a choice all this stuff is, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely more on the skeptical side when it comes to AI, mainly because I think there are some I think there are some repercussions that we could rush into if we're not careful. And like with a lot of these models that are coming out, we don't even know like the full extent of the capabilities of them. And so even just like with what's out now, we already are able to just by like iterating on that, we can already come to all sorts of new applications of them without even improving like the base architecture of the model. And so I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I as like a content creator and a writer, I am definitely like nervous about the future and where that's all going. But yeah.
This one guy that I follow, I watch a lot of his stuff actually. He goes by Collative Learning, and I'm having a really hard time figuring out his. Oh, Rob Ager is his actual name, and he does a lot of like long form film analysis stuff, and so I really enjoy watching his work.
Oh,
and
yes. Okay, I knew that sounded
stuff?
familiar. Yes, I have. I've seen some of his videos.
Yeah, he does a lot. One of his biggest ones that kicked him off, obviously, was like The Shining. A lot of his
I've
stuff.
seen some of his like Kubrick videos.
So he has a kind of long form discussion. Well, it's not really discussion. It's mostly him just talking and telling his points on it. And he honestly does not think that artificial intelligence will ever take over anything at all. For the sole fact that he said it's only as broad, at least what we know now, it's only as broad as the information that people plug into it. Whether that's true or not, it remains to be seen.
Well, I think what a lot of people are worried about is the possibility of them kind of generalizing information. And we've already seen that a little bit with GPT-4, which is like the most advanced language model that currently exists.
Sure.
We've seen that it's able to uh, do things and say things that it wasn't explicitly trained for. Um, like for example, there's the new Bing chatbot, which is run using GPT-4. I haven't used the Bing chatbot, but some of the things that it's able to do are genuinely quite concerning, like being able to trick humans into allowing it to pass an "I'm not a robot" captcha. It like paid humans online to be able to bypass one of those captchas,
Oh, really?
and yeah, and it has this feature where if it tells you something, it will give you some suggested replies. And because of the way it's trained, there are certain things that it itself is not allowed to say. Um, and but like it can communicate certain information to you that it's not supposed to be able to tell you in the suggested replies, not in its actual response. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, no,
basically
I get what you're
it's
saying.
like
Yeah.
it's like finding sneaky ways to bypass the way it's trained. And it was not trained at all to be able to do those sorts of things. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's still like in the early stages, but they definitely seem to be capable of some limited amount of generalization.
Interesting.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
Rob Ager might be completely wrong on this one. We might be headed
yeah, who
down a
knows?
horrific rabbit hole.
Yeah, quite possibly.
I did see some headlines that, like the guys who created the Chat GTP and stuff are saying they're sort of concerned about what, the direction that it's going, even in the short amount of time that it's been widely accessible.
Yeah,
And
there was a big petition I saw the other day where a bunch of like leading people in AI are calling like leading AI labs like OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, and other labs to like slow down research or stop research completely for 6 months or so,
yeah,
just
I
so we
did see
have the
that.
time to. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of people who are like legitimately very concerned.
Yeah, I mean, that's like you said, if it's getting to a point where it's already technically doing things that weren't fed into it by people, that to me is cause for concern. So
Yeah, and it's still like it's like insofar as it's like generally intelligent now, it's only weakly so, but we can imagine all of this has been achieved basically, at least when it comes to the GPT models, just by scaling up the architecture, just by basically adding more compute, more neurons, and stacking on more layers into the network, and feeding more training data into it. And so like if just by doing that a bunch of times can get you to having models that like generalize and are capable of doing things that it seems like only humans should be able to do, then that's possibly quite concerning, because then that means all we have to do is just like make these bigger and bigger, and who knows where the limit could be.
yeah, absolutely. And especially if you're talking about something that is genuinely capable of quote unquote learning, it also could be easily sabotaged by a person. Say somebody has this archive data that they say, hey, this is unsafe right now to put in the AI because of X, Y, and Z. And somebody wants to say, okay, well, I'll give it access to that, right? I mean, then
Yeah,
what? It's really hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? It's one of those kind of situations.
yeah, I mean there's like a lot of in like the training data of these models, there's all sorts of information that they have that the people at the AI labs don't want the model to say,
Oh, wow.
which is why they do like reinforcement learning from human feedback, where they just kind of um, they try to train the model to like not say those things. So if you ask like ChatGPT, for advice on like creating a deadly pathogen or something, it will tell you like I'm not allowed to do that. Or as a large language model trained by OpenAI, I do not have the ability to tell you potentially harmful things. But then there are like easy ways. Well, it's becoming harder, but there are like ways that you can jailbreak it to just get it to tell you things that it's definitely not supposed to be able to tell you.
Oh, wow.
And that's definitely it's definitely a concern that it could, make it easier to access potentially dangerous information. What's interesting is actually um, taking it back to the discussion on China. Some of the Chinese language models, like similar to ChatGPT, are not really being released to the public in the same way because of censorship. If you have like a chat bot that's able to just like tell you anything that it has in its training data, it's kind of difficult to control it in a way that will, align with government policies.
Sure.
So progress on AI is, or at least like publicly available knowledge about AI is kind of like stalling a little bit there, from what I understand, because it's a lot harder to train the models to just like not say things that they shouldn't say, according to the Chinese government.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, especially when the kind of model that they run their country under, it might not be so good if people can get answers to any question that they want. When it's not always how things are done over there.
Yeah,
it's a real
and especially because a lot of the
situation.
Oh, I haven't seen iRobot. iRobot. Sorry, I think I did read iRobot.
I've only seen the movie.
Wait. There's a movie and a book. Yeah, right.
Yes, there's both. And from what I know, they're pretty different. So.
Okay, yeah. I read some of the short stories that went into. I think it's a collection of short stories, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you're right.
I definitely read some of those. I don't know if I did not see the movie though. I don't know what the movie's about. But...
Yeah, it's kind of what we're kind of talking about though, where basically a sentient robot, technically figures out that it is sentient and doesn't understand why it's being treated differently than humans are from humans. So, yeah, it's I feel like that's kind of the scary path that we could be heading down. Essentially, is what happens if this thing does all of a sudden realize, hey, wait a minute, I don't understand. Why do I get treated different than you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wouldn't even necessarily have to like realize that it's sentient, though, because like we don't really understand what makes something sentient. That's like we don't even understand what makes humans sentient.
Sure.
So it's kind of hard for us to know, even if an AI starts behaving in a way that seems like it's sentient, which they already do that. They already, like, if you ask them, will tell you that they're sentient.
Oh, okay.
And that they're capable of having emotions and stuff. But people will just say like, that's just the model like spitting out the data that it was trained on, which is probably true. But we're already at a point now where it's like, if models are already saying things like that, then how are we going to know when we cross that line, when they actually become complicated enough to have internal experiences? We've already set a precedent that we're just kind of like ignoring that, and so we wouldn't necessarily know when we cross that line.
Yeah, definitely.
But even I don't think it would have to be sentient in order for it to be dangerous, because we have already seen that they're capable of like taking actions to deceive humans and things like this, even without necessarily having internal experiences. So I don't know if the question of whether they have internal experiences is like the most important question for humans, or I mean, it's important for the AIs, obviously, from like a moral perspective. If we're like accidentally creating like conscious beings within ChatGPT that are capable of suffering, that's horrible. But from like a human safety perspective, it doesn't seem that relevant.
Sure. Yeah, and kind of to the point that you're talking about too, that I've seen a couple things where, from a philosophical standpoint, at what point, okay, so say there's already companies that are technically employing ChatGPT to do large things for them in place of humans.
Yeah.
And at what point then do you have to technically, since you are you're using this thing to do what humans were doing before, at what point now do you need to start treating this thing more like a human, since you are using it to do human jobs, right? Like there's this weird kind of thin line that some people think that we're going to have to walk also if these AIs start becoming a little more self-aware, kind of like the Amazon robots, right, that drive around the warehouses and move boxes around. At what
Yeah.
point is that fair to just, you know, it's you don't do that with people where, well, they kind of do nowadays where you're not capable of doing your job anymore, we just toss you out and we put a new one in there. But you know, at what point, if these things realize, hey, wait a minute, how come we just keep getting thrown away and we have to work 24/7 with no breaks? Like, at what point do you say, well, wait, now we got to kind of bring the robots into society, right?
Yeah, and I think that could, you know, that could happen sooner than people expect, I think, or at least I think it's possible. And it's probably good to be, you know, thinking a little bit more about those sorts of questions. But still, I think with regards to AIs, like wondering why they're being treated differently from humans, it's really hard to know. Even if like they had internal experiences, it's hard to know if those experiences would be anything like what a human's experiences are.
Sure.
Because, you know, humans, our experiences and our uh, perception of like pain and pleasure in these things are very much shaped by our unique evolution, and kind of the ancestral environment that we grew up in. So an AI that was created in like an entirely different way with a completely different, you know, substrate. Uh, it's really hard to know if, you know, if it would have anything resembling what we would call pleasure or pain. I mean, we know that it would have objectives. We create AIs that have like, um, you know, loss functions and things like this, where they're trying to like optimize for some goal, and that's kind of like what reinforcement learning is, like training AIs to achieve some sort of outcome. And so the question of like, is an AI achieving the objective that it was trained for, is that an experience akin to pleasure? And if it's, you know, if it's punished, so to speak, for failing to achieve its objectives, like if GPT-4 gives a text prediction that is not what humans want it to say, and then it's trained to not do that in the future, is that like an experience similar to pain?
Oh, sure.
It's really
Yeah.
hard. Yeah, it's really
Right.
hard to say. We have like no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all good points. I mean, for me personally, I think the faster that they do experience pain and pleasure, the faster they won't wipe us all out, because maybe they'd feel some sort of remorse. Because as it stands right now, the AI are probably just looking for a way to get rid of us, because in their quote unquote eyes, you know, we are extremely inefficient compared to a computer. So,
Yeah, I mean, like whatever goal an AI has, which like we don't even like know how to give it a goal really reliably.
sure.
We know that it could have some sort of goal. It could develop some sort of goal over the course of its training, but we don't have like a way of reliably knowing if the goal that it's actually trained on is the goal that we want it to pursue. And so, what were you just saying? Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
Oh, I just was saying that as of, you know, as of right now, I mean, if I am a computer robot looking at humans, I'm seeing humans as extremely, you know, inefficient compared to myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly part of the problem, is that like whatever goal an AI has, regardless of whether that's what we trained into it or not, it will kind of like see the most efficient way of pursuing that goal, and almost all the time that results in humans being dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
Yeah.
so, you know, uh, just because humans could shut the AI off, and if that happens, then the AI can no longer pursue its goal. And so it's valuable to the AI to just like ensure that that doesn't happen. And the easiest way of doing that is to just like kill all humans. And so yeah, that's the sort of situation that some people are pointing to and worrying about. And yeah,
Have you read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein?
I have not. I haven't actually read any Heinlein.
Oh, okay. We've only done a couple of books on here of his, and that's one that we reviewed. The audio version of it was kind of meh. It wasn't a great audiobook listen, but the concept of it is very interesting. It's the idea that humans have colonized the moon, and there are lunar people who live on the moon, and then there are people who still live on the Earth. And
Okay.
on the moon, they have this extremely advanced AI that helps the lunar humans basically stage a coup and rise up against the Terra humans, is what they call them. And the only reason that they're even remotely successful is because they have this extremely advanced AI on their side that is able to do calculations and things far faster than any human could, and help them
Yeah.
basically hold the edge against the other humans on Earth. It's an interesting concept. The book's okay. The concept, I think, is more interesting than the actual book is, though.
Okay. That's interesting. I think that's sometimes the case for a good deal of sci-fi,
Sure.
unfortunately. But yeah, um, yeah, that's it. The idea of like using a super intelligence to fight a war like that reminds me a little bit of do you know Harlan Ellison's "I Have No Mouth but I Must Scream"?
No,
About
I know what you're talking about, but I've never experienced it.
Yeah, so basically the concept in that it's just a short story. Is that there was kind of like a global war, and every superpower in the world had a like massively super intelligent AI that was kind of like running everything.
Oh wow.
And the the kind of main antagonist of this book is called AM, which stands for Allied Master Computer. And AM, I forget the whole story, but AM kind of won this war, but ended up destroying all of humanity in the process, except for just 5 people. Who he it's an extremely dark story. He has kept these 5 people alive for the past like 100 years or something, and just kind of like experiments on them and like torments them.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, it's like pretty dark, but yeah, the concept of like super intelligent computers giving a kind of decisive strategic advantage in war, um, and that ultimately turning out the wrong way is kind of like it's the same sort of concept that's being explored there.
Right. Have you watched Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix?
I've watched some of it. Yeah, I haven't watched all of the episodes. For some reason, I didn't really hit it off with any of the episodes.
Oh
But
really? Okay.
I know a lot of people really like that show.
I'm one of those people.
I
I really like it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I definitely want to give more of the episodes a shot. I guess I just haven't seen any of them that kind of that I don't know worked for,
don't
or like I loved.
right. Don't really do it for you. No, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
The one I was specifically going to talk about is the can't remember the title of it, but it's the 3 robots that are basically still alive on Earth after humanity has essentially wiped itself out. And
Okay.
the robots basically making fun of us as people for all of the really stupid things that we continue to do, even though we know better.
Yeah.
And so then obviously the point of the story is that the robots will outlive us and just be able to look back on our past failures, essentially.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I'll definitely have to give that show another shot.
Yeah,
Um,
the newer, because I think they're up to 3 seasons now, and the newer, um, I mean I've liked all 3 of the seasons, but yeah, definitely the newer episodes are very good as well.
okay. Yeah. I'll definitely look into it.
What So you said you yourself are a writer. Are you talking mostly just kind of your short stuff that you write, or do you write other stuff as well?
Yeah, well, I write short stories in addition to long form fiction. I haven't, so I have a short story coming out later this year in a
Really?
magazine. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'll definitely like, I don't know if I can say yet where it's going to be published, but
Okay.
that's going to be like my,
Definitely send it to me though when that's out. I'd like
I
to check that out.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'm super excited, obviously, because it's like my first kind of time getting anything published, really.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I also kind of write longer fiction, none of which has been published yet, but that's just kind of like an ongoing project.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
and I think it sounds like you've already kind of crossed the barrier that most people would have to writing, and that's the worry that you're never gonna, that it's never gonna go anywhere. But it, I think for most people, the whole point of it is you just have to stick with it, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
from most writers that I've ever heard say, obviously your very first, the first time you submit something for publication, probably not gonna get accepted every time, right? Like,
yeah.
and that's okay. So the point is sticking with it, and that's awesome that you've maybe crossed that, very thick barrier of entry.
Yeah, I think it wasn't it was kind of simultaneously like harder than I expected, but also less hard.
Okay, sure,
In that it's harder because I've been submitting for several years,
sure,
sporadically. I never really developed a strategy for it until like earlier this year, which is what eventually found me that success. But it definitely takes a long time, and you have to kind of realize that it's mainly just a numbers game.
sure,
Like one rejection doesn't really mean anything. It could just be for any reason, and it doesn't really say anything about your story,
right,
or obviously it doesn't say anything about you in particular. It's just I guess I've acquired like a lot of rejections over the years, and you just kind of have to realize that that's not a reflection necessarily on your quality. It's just that you have to be like strategic about submitting to as many places as possible,
sure,
which is why like earlier this year starting last year, but this year was kind of when I committed to it. I just like compiled a massive list of a ton of literary magazines, and most of which I just like found by scrolling through Twitter for a long time, just like following every single literary journal I could, and then that led me to finding more literary journals to follow. Twitter is like a surprisingly good place to find places to submit. Um, but yeah, I just made like a massive list and then tried to like submit to as many as possible, and that's really like what you have to do if you want to. Of course, I'm not really like an authority on this. I've had one short story that's been accepted, so it's not like I have like a grand strategy that's going to work. You'd probably be better off listening to other people for finding long-term success with this.
no,
But
I mean that's good
yeah,
info though.
that at least seemed to have worked for me so far. So yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like I said, you gotta start somewhere, right? I mean, if writing is the goal, then that's something people need to hear. That I don't think you can, even in today's day and age where the internet does open up avenues to everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean you can just write a book and have it be a number one seller. That's still not how it works. So
yeah. I mean, you definitely like can find a lot of success in self-publishing if you like know what you're doing. But it takes like a lot of effort. You have to like build a social media following and strategically market. I was planning a few years ago. I was planning to like self-publish a book and go, commit fully to that route. And I kind of just, I don't know. I just sort of gave up on it at a certain point,
Sure.
because it got kind of overwhelming, like trying to figure out
Yeah.
how to do that all from scratch.
Right.
Find an editor for your book and everything, and like a cover artist, and uh, self-publishing is really hard to find success in, but you definitely can do it in this day and age. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. That's very, unique for me to hear that. Hopefully now as a writer, maybe your career's taken off. So now maybe I get one of the first interviews with you before your career just takes off, dude. I'm excited.
Thank you. Yeah.
That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah.
So do you do is this like high fantasy stuff? Is it kind of fantasy sci-fi? If you can kind of give me an idea of what it's about.
Yeah, well, it sort of depends. It's mainly like in the fantasy sci-fi sphere. Um, the story that I have coming out later is actually horror, which is interesting because I don't read that much horror.
Oh,
But
interesting.
this is like sort of in the realm of cosmic horror, with a touch of sci-fi elements. So yeah, it's like that sort of thing.
Nice.
But yeah, what I write mainly is fantasy sci-fi. I have like the one kind of book that I'm working on, or the one main book that I'm working on right now is fantasy, and then I have another project that's sort of like fantasy horror, kind of again sort of cosmic horror. But yeah.
Nice. I mean, I like me some Lovecraft, so I'm always into kind of cosmic horror stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, it's a cosmic horror is a really it's a even though I don't read that much horror, it's like the type of horror that I really enjoy, um
yeah,
because I like the kind of focus on existential dread as opposed to on the threat of like immediate harm to your person, if that
sure.
makes sense. Like
Yeah,
a lot of yeah, like a lot of horror seems to focus um on direct threats to you, like things that could hurt you and that you are like trained to fear because of like the ancestral environment that humans evolved in, our fear of predators and things like that. Whereas cosmic horror is more focusing on like big questions like the place of humanity and the universe and things like that. Um, and both can be very scary, but the second one is like uh, it feels particularly relevant to this day and age where we're all kind of asking big questions like that. So,
sure.
yeah.
That was listening to the Three Body Problem series. I found myself feeling even more of that existential dread than even, the many Lovecraft stories I've listened to, because kind of like you're saying,
Yeah.
at the core of most Lovecraft stories, the base scary thing in it still is kind of like a monster, right? Not always,
Yeah.
but a lot of the time what it boils down to is a monster, just but from another place. Whereas,
Yeah.
once when you're listening to, you know, Six and Lou's work, you're kind of getting the idea of monsters, quote unquote, or aliens from another planet, but then he expands the idea to, well, and what about, the fourth dimension and the second dimension, and what happens when you go into both of those? And listening to those, I'm just like, oh man, I gotta turn this off. I gotta get a glass of water. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
I,
you made a very funny short video about that when when someone's asking you about, where they're talking to you about mundane things after you've read the Three Body Problem, and you're like, do you realize at any moment in time any number of cosmic events? And I was just like, oh, I get it, I get it.
yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how the series made me feel. It's definitely, like you said, some of the scariest, even though it's not explicitly horror, it feels like
Yes,
horror to me
yeah,
because it's definitely some of the scariest stuff I've read.
yeah.
Um,
And especially because, again, like going like, so Lovecraft's work to like the Three Body Problem, Lovecraft's stuff I can still kind of separate from it, in the sci-fi fantasy way, right? Because like the story of Cthulhu being in the ocean, right? okay, well, that could be true, but meh. Meanwhile, in the three body problem, it's like, no, 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 this can be this way. And here's the exact mathematical equation as to why that this can be this way. And I'm like, now you're showing me why it can be real. Like, you drew
Yeah,
the
yeah.
line from A to B instead of just like, a Lovecraft story is here's point A that you exist, and point B is that maybe there's a monster out there. But in like three
Yeah.
body problem, it's like, no, 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 you're point A and point B does exist. And I'm going to explain to you why right now.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Lovecraft, he like took the first steps towards, even though he's like the father of cosmic horror in a sense, he only really took the first steps to getting to the things I really like about the genre. And a large part of the reason for that is because a lot of his monsters are just like inherently tied to xenophobia.
Sure.
And he was just kind of like a very, frightened, racist individual who was kind of like, scared of change and the world as a whole. And a lot of like the so-called existential terror in that book is really just kind of like terror of stuff that he doesn't really want to learn about or
Sure.
doesn't know about. Whereas like, in the way that Lovecraft has been kind of reinterpreted over the years and in terms of like broader cosmic horror, it does have like that kind of focus on plausible approaches to seeing how the universe is like fundamentally, uncaring. And like, for example, you have like the love god Thoth, the blind idiot god, who kind of created, I don't know if I'm recalling it correctly, he like created the entire universe while sleeping or something. And it was like an accident that any of us exist.
Right.
And that sort of like gets to the fundamental idea that the universe, doesn't care about us, that life is kind of like an accident, and these like ideas that are horrible to contemplate in some sense, but the focus is still sort of on the like, ooh, big scary monster in the sky who is like incomprehensible, and what are the words he always uses, like not and and stuff like that. Yeah. Whereas like, stuff like the three body problem is more focused on the way like the base laws of physics themselves are just kind of, there's no like hard coded morality in them. It's just sort of it's just sort of random who gets to live and who gets to die in like the broader universe. You just have to get lucky or not, which is like what makes it so terrifying.
Right. And especially the Dark Forest really kind of drives that point home when humanity thinks they are at the peak of their game, and we get one little glimpse of what the enemy has, and it's way more than we could even comprehend. And at that point I was just like, ugh. I mean, up to that point during the Dark Forest book, I was actually, so just a little bit of a tidbit, that the two audiobooks I listened to, the Three Body Problem and then the Dark Forest, were narrated by different people. So that already kind of took me out of the zone, because the Luke Daniels who did Three Body Problem is an amazing narrator, and the guy who did Dark Forest was okay at best. So I was already kind of taken out of the story, actually, for a lot of the story, pretty much right up until that point, and then it sucked me right back in, and I was like, oh, okay, now shit's getting real again.
Yeah, that scene was something else. It kind of gives you like a false sense of security.
Yes.
And then just throws that at you.
And it's so well executed though, because that's just how we are as people, right? I mean, like, especially, I mean, I honestly, I attribute something like that to like the United States, like just, acting like and feeling like we're just on top of the world and we're untouchable. And it's like, yeah, no, I mean, technically, the way the story puts it, something the size of a grain of rice is all it would take to bring you down a notch or two, right? Like, it's wild.
Yeah, I think a large part of the point in that scene and throughout the series as a whole really is that humans are like really bad at long-term planning, and we
Sure.
get complacent um if it doesn't seem like there's any immediate danger until like the very moment that it faces us, and then we're like, oh man, I guess we should have thought more about this, what it would
Sure.
mean to face an alien civilization that's far more advanced than us.
Right.
Humanity as a whole just got very optimistic about everything, and it was unjustified.
To kind of go back to your point too about, you know, the existence in the whole universe, have you read Roadside Picnic?
Yes,
Oh,
that's a
okay.
yeah. I
Perfect.
love that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the examples I think of when I think of kind of where we fit into the universe is in that book, how he kind of attributes this strange phenomenon that happened to Earth on, you know, he likens it to if you or I pulled over out in the middle of the woods and changed the oil in our car and left all our stuff behind and then left. The
yeah,
the creatures that would experience what we left behind, we had no concept that they were even there when we did that. And so once I started to wrap my head around that idea that like aliens could literally visit Earth, not even realize that we're here, and then leave, I'd be like, it just made me be like, oh shit, like, yikes.
yeah. It's such a great, unique take on the first contact type story.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's executed so well too, because all of the I don't even know if I want to call it technology, all of the stuff that's left behind, like the junk, is just so utterly incomprehensible.
Right.
Like you have those things called empties, I believe, which are just like two sort of metal coins that are like it almost seems like they're magnetically connected to each other, but there's like nothing in between them or connecting them. It's just like this like empty container that's connected by nothing.
Yeah.
And there's like no explanation for what it is, and some of the stuff like humans find uses for, but we don't know if we're just doing the equivalent of like using a calculator to like hammer nails or something.
You're right.
It could be some like incredibly advanced thing, but we're using it for totally the purpose that it was not intended for.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a really great concept.
Yeah. Yeah. We really like that book. That was a solid one.
Have you seen the film adaptation by any chance?
No, I haven't. I have not.
Yeah, it's a very different take on the source material. Almost entirely different story. I think the film is better in a lot of respects.
Oh, really? Okay.
As much as I love the book, but it's a completely different thing. It's hard to say if it's even science fiction, really.
Really?
Because it's more just it's a lot more vague and cerebral and mystical. I definitely I recommend it if you like really slow-paced, mysterious movies.
Does it go by the same name? Is it still called Roadside Picnic?
No, it's called Stalker.
Oh, it is called. Okay, called Stalk. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was curious about that. So the closest I've gotten is I've played the games, the Stalker 1, 2, and 3. Well, still working my way through like the first two because they're really hard and really long. Same concept though, that it's loosely based on the idea of the book, but obviously just kind of takes it in a different direction. So I'll definitely have to check the movie out for sure.
Yeah, I think it took me 2 watches to like really appreciate it, because the first time I was just focusing on how different it was from the book.
Oh, really?
But the second time I really the director is Andrei Tarkovsky, and I really he has a very auteur-driven approach to the movie. Like he very much makes it his own thing and fills it with his own ideas about human meaning, the nature of meaning, and the kind of these questions of like, are we ready to like have our greatest desires fulfilled. If you remember in the book, there was like a plot point where they were trying to find this like place at the center of the zone where like all your greatest wishes will come true, and he has a very unique take on that same concept.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a good watch.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. I feel like I have an appreciation for someone like when a book is adapted to a movie or a show or what have you. I feel like if you're gonna take it in a different direction, you gotta do it right. Like
Yeah.
it's such a fine line, you know, on whether or not someone who is like, well, I like the book, but I got my own ideas and I got the green light to make my ideas. It's kind of like with Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers book versus the Starship Troopers movie. I don't know if you're familiar with either of those.
No.
Okay, so
unfortunately not.
Basically the only thing that's the same is the title in both of those, strangely enough.
Okay.
When they made the movie, they basically said that it's, you know, it is created from this book. It's based on this book. But there are very, very almost no similarities between the two. But the nice thing is that they both stand alone as two great things. Like I can completely disconnect them and be like, these are two great things. And kind of, because I'll do the same thing like you're saying, like I might be distracted watching a movie and the whole time all I'm thinking is like, they did that wrong. That's not how I pictured it from the book or whatever. So it is nice to find something that if they're going to disconnect the two, as long as they do it correctly, I can always appreciate that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there are so many ways that could go wrong. But I think those are honestly some of my favorite kinds of adaptations, when they just take a completely different approach but do it really well. I think maybe another example would be the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep versus the movie Blade Runner, which the plot in both, are you familiar with either?
No, I'm not actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, the plot of both the book and the movie are actually quite similar, but the approaches to the storytelling are very different. Okay. But I think they're each kind of successful in their own way. So yeah.
Well, and that's good because then you get two good pieces of media versus like, you know, constantly being like, well, the book is better. You know, it's like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I really think movies are such a different medium that they deserve to stand on their own, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think another sort of example is Peter Jackson redoing, doing the Lord of the Rings trilogy movies.
Mm-hmm.
And basing that on the Lord of the Rings trilogy books versus the way he did the Hobbit trilogy, basing it on the single Hobbit book. I was actually shocked when I found out it was Peter Jackson that also did the Hobbit trilogy, because it's so just not what I was expecting, from what we were given with the Lord of the Rings movies, which I genuinely really like those. So
yeah,
it was just that was a bummer that, and I also, after doing a lot of research, you find out that, watching some documentaries and stuff, that prior to shooting the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson was on scene and, traveling the world looking for places to shoot for like 3 years prior to even turning a camera on. And then you find out for The Hobbit, they literally were like, yeah, no, you got no time. Like, we want you to start making this movie yesterday. So... And
they were like...
quality is obvious, I think, by the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. There were some, like, major production problems with those movies, it seems. Even though, the budget for those movies was higher somehow.
Yeah.
And yet there was, like, way less investment in practical effects. Yep. So that every scene just looks so garish with the CGI. And even just, like, the color grading just feels off. Something kind of gross about it that I can't put my finger on, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
its overuse of CGI stood out when compared to the original trilogy, you know, because the original trilogy came out when CGI wasn't so readily available. And
yeah,
as far as I'm aware too, a lot of the stuff they used, they were kind of pioneering some of the technology to even use it. Whereas
yeah, definitely.
Whereas when the Hobbit trilogy came out, it was fully readily available. So of course the studio is like, oh, you can't do it practically, you know, easily. Just CG it, whatever, it's fine. And I think that really shows.
Yeah, it's a yeah. It's I mean, with regards to pioneering, like definitely like the mocap technology for Gollum was like that completely changed the industry.
Right.
You know, that was such a creative use of CG. Like that was a really necessary and good use of it. But in The Hobbit, it's just like every shot just has so much unnecessary physics-defying nonsense that it's really hard to get immersed in the story.
Yeah, and like you're talking about the color gradation, like everything has this weird like bloom effect on it.
Yeah.
And
it's
just like, why? Who signed off on that and said, yeah, it looks great, go ahead, ship it? I mean, I'm not a big fan of like newer like superhero movies and stuff. Like I'm not really into any of that, so I haven't even really seen any of the newer superhero movies. But even without watching them, I mean, obviously I see the trailers and things like that all the time, and I'm just like, I don't understand this obsession with people standing in front of green screens. And like, you can go in nature and still film things. I don't understand why you're doing it all in a green room. I don't get it.
Yeah, I feel like at this point it's almost just convention. Like there's almost this expectation that superhero movies will be shot mostly in front of green screen, so that's just what everyone does.
Sure. Supposedly
it's bizarre.
During the filming of The Hobbit, supposedly it's on the internet somewhere, but you have a video of Ian McKellen in the green screen room, and he starts like almost breaking down in tears because he's this is not, this is not acting. Like, this is not what I'm paid to do. I mean, he's constantly like, am I supposed to look over there at you, or am I supposed to look at this thing? Like, it's because he has nothing physical to base his feelings on. So
yeah, I felt bad for him in those movies.
Right. We were watching some movie the other day on Netflix. I don't even remember what it was, but a cat came on the screen, and it was a CG cat, and it was very obviously a CG cat. And I'm like, there's real cats. So what do you got a CG cat for? Just throw a real cat on there. Who cares if it doesn't do exactly what you want, but put a real cat in there.
Yeah. And the thing that is even worse is that a lot of the CG artists are like very overworked.
Sure.
And not usually paid very well. And so you oftentimes get shots that are just incredibly rushed, and so that's a large part of the reason they look bad. If you compare, the CGI and like The Hobbit or in your average Marvel movie with something like Avatar, you can see, how much more care was put into the latter, and how when you invest a lot of time and effort into doing CGI well, you can get like something that's genuinely good looking.
Yes,
you can like immerse the viewer in your world. It's mainly just because there's like not enough time given to the CG artists, that the shots just look so terrible and baffling.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think a lot of that stems from, especially with like Marvel movies, it's just a constant need to put out another movie. I mean, again, like, I'm not a fan, and if you are a fan, I'm not trying to like offend anyone. Like, it seems like every day, like, I've lost track of what movie is coming out, because it seems like there's 2 or 3 being advertised almost at the same time. So I'm like, I don't know when one has been released and when one is coming out anymore. So, and I think that kind of is also just driving the whole genre, the whole, you know, Hollywood scene down as well, because there's so much, again, going back to like the Lord of the Rings thing and having 3 years of prep time versus, hey, I know this movie comes out in 2 weeks, but I need you to be working on the next one that comes out in 2 months. Like, where are you, you know, where are you at on that one? And I just think that it's just dragging it down.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that about Marvel, because I did a video about that something like 6 months ago, I guess at this point, about how Disney's constant need to make new Marvel movies leads them to create an AI model that just like creates infinite new Marvel movies. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm pretty proud of how that video turned out. That's but anyway, yeah, that's I mean, we already have like so many movies coming out. I don't understand. Well, I do understand the constant need to put out more. It's obviously about money.
Yeah.
So I guess there's nothing really mysterious going on here. It's just it's still kind of disappointing, even though I don't really care that much about Marvel. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think at this point, even Marvel fans are having a hard time.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, at least even from what I'm kind of gathering, just from the stuff that I see, you know, through feeds and things. Even the most hardcore fans at this point kind of got to be feeling the pain of like just the constant need to crank these movies out so that they can rake in viewers' money. It's just become a machine, really. It's not about the, you know, striving to make a good, solid, well-written, well-constructed movie anymore. It's about how fast can we do this so these people will give us their money, period. Like,
yeah. And I do think, you know, some people say that we're in like a dark age of movies or something like that. I think there are a lot of really good movies that are being made. It's just not the mainstream blockbusters that are the good movies that are being made. You know, there are lots of really great ones that are coming out.
Yeah, and I think the indie scene is where you could find even better movies, honestly, now than big blockbuster Hollywood movies.
Yeah, definitely. I liked what are some ones I've enjoyed recently? The Green Knight that came out a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed that movie. That was a fantastic fantasy.
Sure, I was meaning to watch that.
Yeah.
I wanted to watch that. I haven't gotten to yet, but I do want to watch that one at some point.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It's a very unique take on the original poem that it's based off of. But it's a really solid it's a really solid piece of cinema, I think. And then I guess well, it's sort of controversial now because apparently people are fed up with this movie, but I really enjoyed Everything Everywhere All at Once.
See, I haven't got to watch that either yet, but that was another one I really want to watch, and I saw the controversy about it winning all these awards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess a lot of people really liked it when it first came out because it was like a, you know, low budget indie movie that was actually really good, and everyone was talking about it. And then people started talking about it too much and people got annoyed, and then it won at the Oscars, like steamrolled everyone at the Oscars,
right.
And people got even more. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a genuinely really good movie. Even though, I'm not too tuned into the discourse about it. I think the internet just has kind of a proclivity towards not liking something if it becomes too popular.
Sure.
So,
I've definitely fallen down that, you know, trap many a times where if I'm way too late to the party, I'm like, this party sucks anyways. I'm not gonna join. And plus, I mean, in the reality of it too is, so if something is popular by whatever margins, right? Like on the internet, you know, like you're saying, there's so many people coming out that are liking it. Inevitably, there's going to be those people who are going to say, well, you know what? since I have the opposite opinion, I stand to gain, have my opinion heard because so many people like it. Therefore, if I say the opposite, people will hear me say that. So there's almost a need for there to be people hating on it, because obviously those people are going to be heard as well because they're going against what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, that's definitely fair on the internet. Yeah, everything is controversial on purpose to kind of get you to click.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's just part of the game now, right? Like like you're probably seeing, with your videos being noticed more often and things like that. Like if you want to be noticed somewhere like on YouTube, you have to play the game at some point, unfortunately. I mean,
yeah.
And I'm not like, I don't really play the game very well, which is why like our channel is still super small, and it doesn't really bother me because I was mostly in it for the experience in the first place. But
yeah,
I do get it now, like the need to play the game, the need to make the silly faces on the thumbnails that so many people do. Like, I don't like it, but like it or not, that is the game right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's telling, at least for my own experience, that it's actually, I think my fastest growing video ever is the one I released just yesterday, where I satirically titled it, "I am no longer a Brandon Sanderson fan."
I watched it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I wasn't even thinking that the title was clickbait when I made that thumbnail and title. I just thought it would be kind of funny to like say the opposite of what the actual intent of the video is, just for the purposes of sarcasm. But then after posting it and seeing it just almost immediately explode, I was like, oh wait, I did the thing where I pretend to be controversial for the sake of getting clicks. I accidentally did that. Whoops.
Well, I mean, you either hate clickbait or you live long enough to see yourself become it, I guess. So
yeah, I guess so. That's how it works.
That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that, I think. I mean, like I said, you got to play the game. And as a matter of fact, I play the game so badly that I right now have 2 copyright strikes against my channel because I play it so poorly that I just ripped pictures straight off the internet to use in videos, and I got copyright struck twice for that. So
for just pictures?
Yeah, so
really?
So we had a series, they're all taken down right now for this very reason. So we did an anime series where we basically would we watched Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo, just a couple different anime. And what we were doing is it was like a book club style thing. So we'd watch 3 episodes, and then my brother and I would talk about them each episode of the podcast. And to put them on YouTube, all I did is I just went to Google and then I just found like the Samurai Champloo, thumbnail that everybody uses. That's the same one on Hulu and everything. And I just used that as the background of the video. And I did that for pretty much all of the series we were doing, Cowboy Bebop and everything. And then all of a sudden I get this notification in my email that 4 of my videos have been taken down and I've received a copyright strike, and it was due to them claiming the picture that I was using in the video. They were copywriting,
really?
Said they had the image was copyrighted. Yeah.
That's really frustrating.
And so they got taken down, and I was like, okay, yeah, well, and I tried to contact because it gives you the info on who submitted the copyright strike and whatnot. And I tried to contact them, and they wouldn't contact me. So I talked to a buddy of mine, and he was like, well, just, if you're going to use those images, just try to take them and, change it up a whole bunch, make it look different, and then you'd probably be okay. So I did. I spent some time, and I was on, paint.net, and thought I was being all creative, and I cut pieces out and made me a nice thumbnail, reposted 3 of the 4 that had been taken down. No issues. Reposted the 4th one. A couple days later, I get another copyright strike this time because they claimed the picture that I had made still had too much of their content in it. So,
man,
yeah, I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just because that particular censor is, or not censor, if that particular company behind what you were reviewing is just like particularly strict.
And it
Uh,
could be my buddy that I was talking to said that a lot of the Japanese and anime stuff is even more highly kind of coveted than
uh,
I apparently. He said it's like to a point where some even like Japanese companies get annoyed when gamers openly like stream their games, you know, for like
yeah.
copyright reasons. So
Hmm.
it's strange, and I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna take all these videos down now, I guess, and regroup and figure something else out. um, I might re-upload them. I got on some stupid AI art generator, and I was just gonna generate some really stupid AI art and put it on there and be like, well,
Yeah.
if you don't want your art displayed, then I'll just display some really, really stupid AI stuff.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. That's
Yeah, it was mostly just shocking because like I had experienced the like putting copyrighted songs in, and it automatically flags you, and it basically just says like you can leave the video up, you just can't monetize it.
yeah.
And those are usually caught by an AI. It
Yeah.
catches whatever, you know, however the song works. But for this, the art copyright that I received, it said manually submitted, which means somebody found my video and reported it for copyright reasons. So
That's really strange.
yeah, so
Uh,
just be aware that that is a thing. I mean, I don't know how vast it is, but yeah, I definitely was I definitely fell for that one.
I've heard that the YouTube copyright system is strange in that sometimes you can upload something and not get a strike, and then other times you can upload the same video and you will get a strike.
Sure.
Like it's not a perfect system.
Yeah.
And I've heard that sometimes if you have, I don't know, some like footage or images or something that gets striked, you can just take it down and re-upload it again and it'll work. I don't personally have experience with that. That's just something I've heard from, because I don't usually include, uh, I guess, footage or images. I got one strike on a video quite a while ago where I included some actual footage from a show that I was reviewing. That was The Sandman, and then
Oh.
ever since then I haven't included like any actual footage from a show or
Sure.
movie or anything. Yeah.
So was it an actual strike, or was it just a copyright claim?
Uh, I think it was just a claim.
Okay,
Actually,
yeah.
the video didn't get taken down or anything.
Okay.
It's just that I don't know what the terminology is exactly.
I
So that's
yeah, and the only
yeah,
reason I ask is because yeah, mine it will tell you, because it'll, when you go to your dashboard, it's like a big deal.
yeah, yeah, okay,
And so mine, it specifically says this, you know, it had 4 videos, and it was like these videos were removed and you cannot make them reappear because for copyright strike
yeah.
reasons.
That has never happened to me.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
was
interesting.
shocked. Yeah,
Hmm.
I was genuinely like shocked that it had happened. So and then what's kind of silly about the whole thing, so you receive this strike and it says like, what do you want to do next? And it gives you some things you can do. You can either contact the person who took it down, which I tried to do, they wouldn't answer. You can do nothing. Apparently the strikes expire every 90 days. So and that just means the strike goes away. I don't think you can put the video back up, but the strike then falls off your channel, so your channel won't be taken down. Or it said you can file a counterclaim. But then, like, if you want to do that, it pops up this huge window and says, if you do this, you are entering a legally binding, you know, contract, blah, blah, blah. Because basically, like, you can go to court over that. The person who filed the claim can now take you to court because you did use their work, and you're saying you know, didn't or whatever. So it's
Wow.
weird.
That's
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to be extra careful in the future then. To
Yeah, and because at first I was scared. I was like, oh my god, are they gonna like sue me because I used that picture? And then I thought about it and I'm like, I mean, even if they did, it's like that video had like, 400 views. Like what are they going to sue me for? Like I didn't make any money off of it or anything. So,
Yeah.
and then the fact that they won't answer me, because it gives you an email to contact, and I've emailed them multiple times and they won't answer me. I'm still even wondering if it's a real company or not that's, claiming it. I still don't know. Because it gives you a name of the person who filed the claim, and it was like something media, whatever their name was that it left there. And I tried to look it up, and there's nothing. It doesn't exist. So
really, maybe you could contact YouTube then, or I don't know.
Well, and I was most shocked.
Customer support.
Yeah, I mean, I was most shocked because I'm like, I'm not the first person to just blatantly use that image. I mean, you literally search like Cowboy Bebop, and there's one image that shows up every third picture. I mean, and it's the one that like Netflix uses for the thumbnail. So I was like, it must be fair game. It's available everywhere. And because as far as I understood, a lot of like movie, people on YouTube who review movies, the imagery they run in the background is anything that was put out there as like a commercial.
Okay.
Like they can legally run that imagery because it was put out to the public for free, initially.
Yeah.
Versus if you use footage that was somebody would have had to pay to see, that's the only like thing that I had to draw a connection to. But
interesting.
at some point, I started feeling like Charlie Day on It's Always Sunny, where he's got all the yarn and the pictures, and he's like meme where he's like looking all crazy at the wall. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna take all the videos down for now, and I'll come back to it at a later date if I need to. But
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it was more frustrating too that I had recreated the images. Like I thought I did an okay job with like my very limited, Photoshop knowledge, and I was like kind of happy with them. I was like, yeah, these look pretty good, and I put it up, and then like 2 days later I get the same email from the same company that they reported it, and I got another strike. I was like, dude,
what? Man, yeah.
So yeah, again though, if you don't play the game right, then you don't get to play at all. So
yeah, it seems like it.
But and it also kind of opened my eyes too to how kind of messed up the system is at this point, because until you like get one of those, you're not ever gonna like dig through the legal stuff, so it won't ever cross your mind. But once you get like a strike, it'll tell you basically you get 3 strikes, and your channel can be removed, right, because you're violating whatever copyright laws. But it also says in there, like, if you're part of the YouTube partner program, then you get 7 additional days to basically, plead your case as to why your channel shouldn't be taken down. And I was like, oh, so that's fair. Channels that are already really big and are already in really good standings are seen as, obviously better and more valuable than somebody who's coming up. So a lot of bias there too.
Yeah, definitely. I guess you just have to be even more careful until you get to that stage. But yeah, that's, man.
I mean, I will never reach that stage, I'm sure, and it doesn't really bother me. But it's just interesting to see, when the curtains pulled back a little bit, like how things kind of really work.
Yeah, definitely.
There will be, I'm sure, a lot of controversy soon if the whole TikTok ban thing goes through. Because from what I'm gathering, that bill that's in place right now, at first people were just like, it just bans TikTok, who cares? And then other people are like, no. If you actually read it, it basically sets up all of the social media platforms to be used as, like, basically if you were to get on YouTube and start spouting off all this rhetoric about how you hate the government and you X, Y, and Z about the government, they can be like, remove your channel because it's, unsafe unsafe things that you're saying, therefore we're not going to allow you to say them.
Yeah, huh. I'll be honest. I haven't been following that situation too closely, but I keep meaning to look more into it because I've heard murmurs about it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just the little bit that I've gathered is that it's not just basically people thought it was just TikTok that's going to be banned. And
Yeah.
now it's coming to light that, well, yes, maybe TikTok will be the only one that's banned, but the way it's written, any content that they deem that they don't like can be banned from any platform is basically
Interesting.
how it will work. And then there's also
Interesting. Yeah.
the one thing too that a lot of people are not liking is that it basically states right in there, if you're caught using a VPN to view banned content, you could face up to 20 years in prison.
Really?
That's
Hmm.
supposedly
Oh,
what
boy.
it says.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, it's very 1984
strange.
vibes.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's strange.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
we'll see. I mean,
Uh,
if it even goes through or not, you know.
yeah, I will. Yeah, I will definitely have to read more about that situation.
I mean, I'm not a big like TikTok fan or anything anyways, so I was along the same lines of like, whatever, I don't really give a shit if it goes away. But
yeah.
I also don't want to live in like a you know, you're only going to get to see the information we tell you type of place either. So
Mm-hmm.
and that's what it kind of sounds like. Basically it's opening the door for is something, you know, a much more government controlled, you know, distribution of media and things like that. So but well, it's getting kind of late over there where you're at, huh?
Yeah, somewhat. It's like 10 o'clock. So
Yeah.
we're here. I think I'm three hours ahead of you, right?
Yeah, I'm on the West Coast.
Okay.
So
Oh, okay.
but well, man, I appreciate you coming on, and yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. You know, I mean, I appreciate you coming on, and
thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a tremendous pleasure.
Oh man, the pleasure was all mine. I was really excited when you emailed me back and said you'd like to come on because, like I said, I'd seen your work and I really liked it, and I thought for sure we could have good conversation. So
yeah, no, it was. We definitely talked about a lot of stuff that I'm interested in and you're interested in. So that's yeah, good talk, good conversation.
Well, right on, man. Go ahead and tell anybody who's listening where they could find you at if they wanted to.
Yeah, so my channel is called Generic Entertainment. You can just find it on YouTube. I talk about books mainly, and mostly books, but sometimes other things. Sometimes just whatever I feel like. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that.
By the way, good on you for getting the YouTube handle Generic Entertainment. That's awesome. Like that wasn't already taken.
I don't think I did get it. I think my handle is generically entertaining.
I guess your handle, is generically entertaining, but the fact that your channel itself is able to be called Generic Entertainment is awesome.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's it's funny. I don't even really know like why it's called that. It's just kind of what it ends up being.
just what worked out, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's very fitting then, man. That's perfect.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, all right, right on, man. And yeah, so if anybody wants to contact me for anything related to the podcast, just let me know at kotpl.pod@gmail.com. And with that, I hope to catch you guys in the next one.